Thank you. It's really great to be with all of you. I want to learn a lot more about climate change, and I've got a short attention span, so this is kind of the perfect event of the year for me. I really do look forward to it. I want to tell you about a new paper of mine called Carbon Burden. The question that we're after in this paper is, how large are the negative externalities from corporate greenhouse gas emissions? Now, the perspective we bring that's new to this question is we're thinking very hard about the future. We're thinking about what's going to happen to greenhouse gas emissions in the future. And we think it's important to think about the future because if you want to understand how bad global warming is going to be, you need to think a lot about what's going to happen to emissions in the future. The way we're going to measure these negative externalities from carbon pollution is with a new concept that we call carbon burden. Before introducing carbon burden, let me relate it to something that we're all more familiar with, firm value. Let me take you back to Finance 101 and remind you that the formula we use to measure firm value is here. We want to think about every year T into the future. We want to forecast out the firm's cash flows in that year. And we want to discount them back to today with some discount rate R. So firm value we interpret as being the present value of future cash flows. It's the value of the firm to its shareholders through the firm's profits. How big is firm value in the United States? Well, if you sum up equity value across all US corporations, you get a huge number, $66 trillion. Carbon burden looks similar in certain ways, okay? With carbon burden, we're also thinking about every year T in the future. We're also discounting things back to today at some discount rate R, but what we're discounting is not cash flows of a firm, we're discounting emissions times SCC. So emissions, this is our forecast of how much is this company going to be emitting greenhouse gases in that future year T. SCC stands for the social cost of carbon. This is a number that policymakers and scholars use to translate a given amount of emissions measured in tons into a dollar value that's measuring the cost to society for each given ton of carbon pollution. So the interpretation of carbon burden is that this is the present value of the social costs from future greenhouse gas emissions. So it's, in a sense, it's the value of the firm, or it's a negative value of the firm to society, not to shareholders, but to society through the company's pollution activities. And we're curious in the study, like, how big of a number is this? So we measure carbon burden for every single large firm in the US. We measure it for every industry in the US. But the only numbers that I'm going to show you today are for the US in total, for US corporations in total. How big is this carbon burden? So to answer that, we need to put numbers on these things. For emissions, we're going to rely on forecasts by experts. The experts in our government at the Energy Information Administration who are forecasting emissions of the US corporate sector way out into the future. For social cost of capital, again, we're relying on the experts at the Environmental Protection Agency who are forecasting this SCC way out into the future. And for discount rates, we're going to use a range of values, kind of taking advice from researchers in this area. So, you know, the drum roll would be, well, the number we get out of this is very big. We're finding that the carbon burden of the US corporate sector is $57 trillion. That's like more than 10 times larger than what we expected going into this. What we're finding is that the value or the cost of companies to society through their pollution is about 85% the size of the equity value of those firms to their shareholders. It's just another way to see just how big this climate crisis is.